for the Department for Transport up in, well, in London and other areas, but I'm based in London. I've been there for about 7 years. So, and my title is Rail Infrastructure, Rail Planning and Infrastructure Manager, I think. I have to remember.
Planning and Investment Manager.
That'll do. So I work in the Rail Services Group, and I'm responsible for infrastructure projects enhancements. I know you're all probably ex-railway people, so I'm not a railway person. I have previously worked in local government and as a transport planner. So I just happen to be someone who landed a very nice job, which I'm very pleased to, because I have a passion for the railway and a passion for the railway in the south and southwest in particular. I have no rail expertise. I'm not an engineer, so you know. If you've got any technical questions about crush ballast or anything else, then you're best answering them yourself or Googling them, because I won't be able to answer those questions. As I say, I do work for the government, so anything I say is not necessarily to be construed as government policy unless I say so. You know, I have my own views on things, but you know, I will generally say if it's government policy, some of the things we're doing or not. So that's all the caveats out of the way, I think. So we'll crack on. Oh, just put that on again. This is going to work. I'm sharing my screen. There we go. Right. So many of you may already know where we're talking about. We're talking about Devon, and I'm sure many of you will know that once upon a time there were 2 railways that went from Exeter to Plymouth. Mr. Beeching sort of one of them. Well, actually, he's sort of part of one of them, and the other one still exists. So we will be talking about Dawlish, which you can just see to the centre right of the map, and Oakhampton, which is at the top in the middle, and that blank space in the middle where there's just grid lines is Dartmoor National Park. I'm sure most of you will know your geography of Devon quite well. So the first part of the presentation is all about the South West Rail Resilience Programme, and we are talking about Dawlish in particular. And again, many of you will probably be familiar with it. I can't imagine there's anybody in this room that hasn't travelled, or online that hasn't travelled on the line between Exeter and Newton Abbot. The word iconic is often used and used and abused, especially where ministers are concerned and press writing. But you know, I think if any line is in the country is iconic, then I think this one probably is. So this is just east of Dawlish. This is Dawlish. This is behind the camera is Langston Rock, where the railway turns in. And I put this up because this is kind of what demonstrates the start of the story. So you'll see here, just beyond the train, the sea wall and the promenade that goes along the sea wall towards Dawlish Station in the background. There was a gap, and the seawall, the promenade actually dropped to the sea level. Now that happened because when the line was being built back in the 18-something or others, all the people in the Lawn View, those multicoloured houses, didn't want to have people walking along the sea wall along them, looking into their living rooms. So the sea wall at that point, the promenade was dropped to ground level, and that was called the Lawn Gap. So all very nice, but I think the people sort of living there in 2014 probably lived to regret that decision, because on the night of February 6th, I think, 2014, the coast was hit by a rather violent storm, and this was the result, as I'm sure many of you will remember, headline news at the time. So what happened was there was a spring tide and a storm surge, and it wasn't actually the impact of the waves going into the wall. It was ingress in the wall and the water coming back out the other way that sucked the underside of the infrastructure out, and that was what was left. I mean, as a rail person, I'm reminded of a Reverend Audrey story involving Toby, where he had to cross the tram lines, and but if you're not familiar with that, then I'll quickly recall. So that's another view of it, and you can just see there that that's obviously the bit in the middle distance there is the actual breach that was in the previous pictures. But you can also see there the amount of ballast that was washed onto the tracks. I mean, that in itself would have shut the railway for a good 24 hours or so. Never mind the breaches to the seawall. So that's, and I mean, that's okay. That was quite extreme, but it's not atypical of the sort of conditions that have been going on that route pretty much since it was opened. So the railway line was shut as a result of that, obviously, and it was shut for about 6 to 8 weeks. But a month later, while the railway was still shut, thankfully, this was the scene round the corner towards Teignmouth, between Parsons Tunnel and Teignmouth, when 20,000 tonnes of the cliffs came down onto the railway. And clearly that in itself would have shut the railway for several weeks. And in a way, I mean, one can be grateful that the railway wasn't open at the time, and what might have happened had a train been going along there at the time, as we saw sort of on a much smaller scale in Scotland, but sadly fatal. And that clear up, I mean, my colleagues, I wasn't working for the department at the time, but my colleagues assured me that, you know, that event in itself, you know, threatened the very existence of the railway in terms of the clear up operation that was required to get all that, and the threat of more off the railway. So the impact was no services between Exeter and Newton Abbot, and obviously that is the only railway between Exeter and Torbay and Plymouth and the whole of Cornwall. So 1.2 million people cut off from a rail perspective. Cost about 40 million plus to reinstate the railway, and that of course included compensating the train operators who weren't able to run Section 4, Section 8. Can never remember which way around they are, but and there were lots of figures bandied around in the media and elsewhere about what the cost to the regional economy was. But it's safe to say that I think probably 100 millions was a mid estimate, probably at the middle ground of some of the estimates that were bandied around at the time. Yeah, as I say, the first thing Network Rail did, and I appreciate some of you probably are or were employees of Network Rail or its predecessors, so I'm probably telling you a lot that you already know in relation to this. But the first thing they did was to clear up to fill the lawn gap, and you can see the comparison there with the work that was done after the breach to restore the wall and restore the train services. So once that was done, Network Rail set about, and Network Rail were tasked by the Prime Minister. David Cameron went down at the time of the breach and made various political commitments to what was going to happen. But the first thing that Network Rail did was to undertake a fairly quick study to, I've just seen a typo, to ascertain what the best options were to get greater resilience between Newton Abbot, not Netwan Abbot, and Exeter. And they looked at a number of things. They looked at the restoration of the Oakhampton line, which we'll come on to a bit later. They looked at the restoration of the Team Valley line, which was always a fairly local railway route through some of those towns that you can see there. And they also looked at rather more radical options of cutting the corner between sort of Marsh Barton and Newton Abbot. But actually they concluded that the best option and the most cost-effective option was to maintain and improve the existing route, not least because there are, you know, all those options. If you do nothing to the existing route, you've still got to serve Dawlish Warren and Teignmouth and Dawlish itself. So they came up with the Southwest Rail Resilience Programme, or SWRP, as we like to call it. I don't need to read all this through. I mean, the problem is fairly apparent. Obviously, rising sea levels and the prospect of more frequent storms, and it's fair to say they're not going to get less, means that the risk of something happening like 2014 again is likely. The point that the programme needed to determine was that actually what was acceptable in terms of resilience. So they came up with the concept of a 100-year level of resilience and 3 levels of disruption, which were based on an event like we saw in 2014, only happening once in 100 years. Events that might shut the railway for between 48 hours and a week being reduced, and similarly events that sort of disrupt the railway for a shorter period of time being reduced as well. And having looked at the whole of the railway, including the estuary from the two estuaries from Exeter to Newton Abbot, they've identified 5 priority sections that needed the greatest of attention. And they asked for some money to develop those, and the government provided, in 2 years after the event, provided 15 million, which was subsequently increased to go away and develop schemes for those 5 priority areas, which I will go through, I think, in a minute. So there are the five areas in map form. So if you know the geography again, you can see Dawlish Warren and Langston Rock and the estuary on the right, and the Tean estuary on the left, and obviously the railways in yellow, and the sections that we'll go through are numbered. Okay, so phase 1 was Marine Parade. So building a new wall at Marine Parade. So that's Dawlish Station behind. So I'm sure I don't need to tell you all this stuff, but anyway, Dawlish Station behind, Kennaway Tunnel in the front. The interesting thing about the railway there at that time is if you put your hand through the railings, and if you're a permanent way institution, you probably know this anyway, if you put your hand through the railings and try and shuffle the ballast around, you can't. It's all glued. It was all glued together. So actually, if you try and move the ballast, it's completely rigid. I mean, I don't know what implication that has on the, on the performance and of the train on track, but obviously designed to stop it getting washed out. But you can see there quite clearly what the problem is, and there you see a problem again, because when the water comes, it kind of, the old seawater's kind of led it up and over. So we've not seen too many of those scenes in recent times, thankfully. The second phase was to extend that seawall and take it round beyond Dawlish Station. You'll see that again the promenade is at a lower level there, going round the listed station buildings at Dawlish, and beyond the station, if you look slightly further back, there's wooden colonnades, wooden posts where the seawall went underneath that, and basically the platform above was built on sort of wooden poles. You've also see there Dawlish Water, which is an outfall from further up the valleys in Devon, which comes out under the railway just west of Dawlish. Again, I'm sure you know. Phase 3 was a rockfall shelter and some cliff protection. So we're moving away from the effects of the sea and moving here towards the effects of the cliffs, which obviously were, as you saw in the earlier slide, were just as much of a problem for the railway as the sea was. So here we're now talking about cliff protection measures. Phase 4 is kind of in between Parsons Tunnel and Dawlish. So again, sort of similar sort of treatment or cliff protection works. There is a railway on the right hand side. You can just about see the tunnel on the tunnel entrance on the centre right. I can't remember which tunnels. Clark and Phillip and Corriton are the 3 tunnels, but I can never remember which order they're in. And finally, the longest stretch is phase 5, which is all the way from Parsons Tunnel to the bend at Teignmouth. It's a mile-long stretch of route. Again, it's all about protection of the cliffs. I think the actual rockfall you saw was probably in the middle distance there, around that area. Of course, you can. Sorry, not all these pictures are mine. So if they're going on a public, if they're going on the site, they're not all my pictures. Some of the various different sources, but you can see this one's a little bit old because there's one of the much loved places there. So before we go into the actual works, for each phase I've just put some stats on there. As I say, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on numbers and things like that, but the seawall was 775 metres long at a cost of 80 million. Our contractor for that was BAM Nuttall. Phase 1 was opened in September 2020. You'll see when I come onto the pictures, there's slightly different construction techniques for each part of the wall. So phase 1, the bedrock was much closer to the surface, so they put a new foundation in and put the wall panels on in the foundation. Whereas phase 2 was piled. And then recurve units, they were backfilled with concrete, recurve units put on the top, and then sort of amenities added like seating and lighting and things like that. So I've described that, but I'll show you much better in pictures. Phase 2, as I say, was constructed slightly differently, and it came up afterwards. The unique part about phase 2 was the use of a wave walker, which you'll see in the pictures and the video if I can get it to work later. That was a barge which had 8 legs, which just walked around and was able to come up and down with the tides to enable maximum amount of work to be done across all the tides. Again, panels put in, this time in front of piling, and a lot of infill concrete put behind. I mentioned the stilling basin, so that was completely refurbished. And a new pedestrian link bridge, as you might have seen in the introductory picture, was provided. So you can now walk all the way from, you can walk at the high level all the way from Dawlish Warren all the way through to Kennaway Tunnel at that high level without having to go up and down and left and right like you used to have to if you were going to do the South Coast Walk, I think it is. At the same time, Network Rail also contributed to some work at Dawlish Station. So we got some improvements put in at Dawlish Station itself, including a new accessible footbridge, which with lifts for the first time. There was some interesting debate over that because a lift provision of lifts right by the sea and seawater and spray was quite interesting. But it did enable the closure of the Barrow crossing on the western side, which Network Rail aren't particularly keen on Barrow crossings and will try and close them where they can, not unreasonably. So just a gratuitous excuse to put an old picture in there of the Barrow crossing at Dawlish.
Yeah.
So this is the work for phase 1. So as you can see, the new base being put in on top of the bedrock, and then the panels being slotted into that and cladding the old walls. So you can see on the far right the old wall's still there, but it's covered with the new wall. And that's what it looked like when a few more of the panels were put in and the recurve unit started going on top. And you can see also on the far right some of the backfilling of the concrete. A lot of concrete involved in this project. So there again on the left you can see that there's looking towards Dawlish Station with some of the backfilling work going in. The middle picture is one of the sort of L-shaped units that was put on the railway side where that old fence railing was. So that's a unit that goes on that side. You'll see what it looks like from the other side in a minute. A lot of these units were shipped over from Ireland. As I say, contractor was BAM, so I was a long way away from the production line and the procurement line. So I don't know why Ireland in particular, but that's where they came from. There were 1 or 2 supply issues during it as well. So there on the left, you see the completed wall looking back towards Dawlish Station. You can see the wave walker there that's busy working on phase 2. And the picture on the right I've put in just because you can then see also, you know, the curve, the wall that was put in on the rail side, but on the actual rail side of that wall, you'll see sort of a brick effect, which was sort of, it's not actually bricks, it was just a brick effect that was put onto that side of the wall, which I think looks quite smart. We've upset a lot of railway photographers, obviously, by putting this in because obviously it was all completely open before. They could have massive, lovely views of their railway. But yeah. People like Colin Marsden, who lives opposite that picture, and I think probably took that picture, actually, to be fair, you know, they've had to find some different views. So there's a before and after shot. So you can see that just shows, you know, how much higher the wall is, how different it is in terms of what the behaviour of the water is once it hits the wall. And also, you know, the promenade that is much higher than the railway. You can see it's sort of about 2 or 3 feet below the railway in the old picture, and it's now actually sort of equivalent distance above the railway. So the seawall is a lot higher than it used to be. And that's it looking the other way. So that's sort of Dawlish over the years. So the top left is probably about the turn of the 20th century, single line working. You can see there's steps on the right, which is why there's still a sort of protrusion on the wall, as is now. I think there might have even been a tunnel underneath the railway at that point. I need to check, read my books. And then obviously that bottom left, and the main picture, they are my pictures. That's kind of the before and after of what it looked like sort of in the 21st century. Phase 2, there's the wave walker, so going up and down, doing its piling work, doing its bit. That came over from, I think it came over from Holland, but it was the first time it had been used in a rail project in the UK. I can't imagine it'll be used again for anything else. I can't think of anything else they'd possibly use it for, but that was there for a number of weeks, and it was kind of a sort of a local tourist attraction. People went down to have a look at it and see how it worked. It doesn't move very quickly. On the left, that's the piling work. So this is looking from Dawlish Station, looking back. And you can see the piling work there and the walls starting to go in. This picture's a wall being built. You can see there that they've got access to the beach for the equipment by this time. So I think the wave walker was there for the piling, but that was about it. And then the backfilling began, and this section in phase 2, there was a lot of backfilling because they've actually, opened out the back of Dawlish Station. Dawlish Station is listed. What I haven't done in this talk is done a preamble about, how we go about getting railway investment and business cases and having to get planning permission and things like that. But Network Rail did require listed building consent and prior approval for this work. So that's really opened out, as I say, that area behind Dawlish Station too. And there's a gate. You can't see it's just out of shot on the left. There's a gate into the station as well, an emergency gate that's been provided pretty much where the Barrow crossing was. This is work on the Stilling Basin. So if you can see, the first thing I had to do was divert the water or flow the channel of the water. So if you see in the top right picture, you can see a diagonal sort of canal that they've created to flow the water through to one side while they're busy working away in the rest of the site. There's probably not a lot more to say about that. You can see where the Stilling Basin comes onto in a minute. A lot of work with concrete sets, so all the stuff on the back of in this part of the project had concrete sets on it rather than just sort of flat concrete. So a lot of work there for Network Rail. I don't know how many concrete sets they use, thousands probably. And as I say, there's been a new bridge constructed between the station and the Marine Parade bit. So if you're walking the South Coast Path along the wall from Dawlish to Warren, you can walk straight past Dawlish Station now and across this bridge and carry on. They put a wooden, as you can see, they put a wooden frame on site to create a sort of special curved effect underneath. And then fill that with concrete, and that's kind of what it looks like. It's not quite finished, as you can see there. You can see the bridge on the left, the steps up to the seawall promenade. The comparison with what it looked like before is quite stark. That's another comparison picture again. Look, you see in the old picture where people used to have to walk round. The station now now there's much better amenities there for people who maybe aren't rail travellers but want to get to the beach. And that's looking the other way. Fabulous day. A couple of things to note here. Top right, you'll see that where on some of the seawall panels they've put in sort of artwork, if you want to call it that, of what the view previously looked like, where the bridge is there at the eastern end of the station, Coast Guard's Bridge, I think that's called. And some of the benches, particularly in the middle bottom picture, were made out of the stone that was retrieved from a Coast Guard's hut that was on the site as well previously, which was taken down. So a bit of recycling of materials there. There's a few good shots here of what it now looks like. I didn't take that. Someone's been out on a boat. And I mentioned the fact that Network Rail had invested into the to the station itself. So there you can see the footbridge under construction, not quite complete. and there it is complete. So it's got the protection over the lift doors. Panoramic view, so, which is, I think, was used in the presentation slide. So that's phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 was the rockfall shelter. So that's at the northern end of Parsons Tunnel. For those of you know, the Parsons Tunnel is the last and longest tunnel before you get towards Teignmouth. 105-metre open-sided shelter. Different contractor here. Morgan Sindall did the work here. The work was mainly done at night while the trains weren't running. Although we did have 1 or 2 interesting challenges with the Night Riviera when we were trying to accelerate works, and the Night Riviera was targeted as something that if we stop running the Night Riviera during the week in the winter when maybe the demand is less, then we could then Morgan Sindall could accelerate work and obviously save cost. So that was done. But the Night Riviera, as some of you may know, is quite a popular train. And it's quite a popular train with MPs and certain members of the House of Lords. So, you know, it's quite a sensitive issue to say, you know, you're going to stop running that, because then people suddenly say, oh, well, you'll take it off permanently. Well, we didn't, but it did help us in this case to accelerate work. The concrete sections of the rockfall shelter that you'll see were brought in by rail from Hackney Yard near Newman Abbot. And they were installed by a rail-mounted gantry train. You can see the words, but I'll show you the pictures in a minute. So, and design is open on one side. And in addition, in this phase, in addition to the rockfall shelter, there was also work done on the cliffs to put nails and netting in to secure the cliffs, so that, yes, while the rockfall shelter might prevent you from falling rocks, the netting and nails provides additional level of protection that stops these things coming down anyway. And work was finished about a year ago. So it's not the first rockfall shelter in this location. The actual tunnel entrance is part of an earlier rockfall shelter, which was built around 100 years ago. So on the left, you see rockfall shelter construction of sort of around 1920s. And that's what on the right is what it looks like now, looking in the other direction towards Teignmouth, covered up. Yeah. The work initially involved in piling on the seaside, which had, as you can imagine, had its challenges. The ground conditions were extremely variable, ranging from bedrock all the way from bedrock to void, which meant that well, invariably it added cost to the project, because Morgan Sindall weren't entirely sure what they were going to find underneath. But what you can see there is four piling drill holes, basically, which carried the supports for the which then had a base added to them, and which carried the supports for the rockfall shelter columns. I'll explain more as we go through. On the right is the access. So the compound was on the top of the cliff, and a sort of scaffolding staircase was constructed to get people down to the site, which I went a couple of times. It was a long way down. It's quite a nice shot. And that's just the piling again. And then the columns started to be put in, and you see there the rail-mounted gantry crane, the rails at the bottom there, which was used to construct the rockfall shelter. You can also see in the background some of the nails and netting that was going in. Some of that, and you can also see the extent of it. So that's obviously the rockfall shelter under construction. Columns put in, roof beams put on top, roof slats put on, but also the back wall was also then put in, and then it was backfilled at the back. That's what one of the nails looks like. And there's people doing, working at heights and working on ropes, doing a lot of the work. It's the back of the rockfall shelter, which has now been filled in. So we went on a site visit and had a wander down there, but you can't do that anymore now, as you'll see. And that's what it looks like now from the air, from up above, off one of the people working on the nails, I think. And that's kind of a driver's eye view. a bit further back, and you can see that the vegetation is starting to grow through the netting already. So it's having an effect on the visual impact. You can see the compound up the top as well. I think they're probably shutting down the compound by then, and that's before and after shot. Let's look in the other way. That's taken from the top of the rockfall shelter, so you can also see it starting to green over on the top. I mean, this was taken a while ago. Green over on the top of the rockfall shelter as well. It's just a nice picture. I'll quickly whiz through phase 4. That's the section in between the two projects I've already spoken about. So there's 3 or 4 tunnels in between Parsons. Well, there's 4 tunnels in between Parsons and Dawlish Station, and the work here is all about cliff protection again. Got back to BAM Nuttall for this work, and in particular they've worked with Natural England on this site. There were 1 or 2 sort of issues with birds, nesting birds, that we thought would need to be protected. Searle buntings, which if you know a searle bunting, it's quite rare. But it was birds of a different sort that we had an issue with, which I'll come on to in a minute. So that's the work. That's the work that's going on. As you can see, more people on ropes and putting nails into the wall. That just shows in the sort of centre right there that landslips were still occurring while the work was going on with the netting. So that's actually obviously it's all private property at the top, and that's a private footpath that comes down to Corriton. Well, it's beyond Corriton Bay. I think it's called Shell Bay. There's a bridge there that takes the path under the railway and out into the bay. That's not quite the same spot. It's the same tunnel, obviously, before and after. So this was the problem we had with birds. So this is back in spring, in April. One of the people coming down the ropes was coming down his rope, put his foot in what he thought was a hole in the cliff face, and he got his foot attacked by an owl. So and when they went in to have a closer look on the left-hand side, you'll see that they found a bird's nest with a couple of tawny owls eggs in it, and they had, funnily enough, they had to stop work because nesting birds are protected, so they had to stop work for a number of weeks. It's 40 days from hatching to fledging, apparently, I'm told, and they put a 50-metre protective area around the bird's nest, and obviously that added time, but thankfully it hasn't added cost, and they've been able to manage that, and there they are. That's one of the baby. They grew pretty quick, so you can see 18th of May on owl cam, which is again Network Rail. Bit of innovation from them there, or BAM maybe it might be. Yeah, it might have been BAM. So a challenge of a different sort, and you can kind of see that that's the work looking to Dawlish in the background to protect the railway. And finally, phase 5. Phase 5 is it's slightly different in the it's not actually reached delivery stage yet. 1 mile section of railway is the most challenging section, not because of the length, but also because of the need to understand what's happening with the cliff. And as you can see, Network Rail has got funding to do development work on it for excuse me, certainly for the remainder of this year. And they're looking at what options they might look at to progress. Initially, the thought was, well, you need to regrade the cliffs. That means either taking it back at the top or buttressing it at the bottom. And because of the level of private property at the top, Network Rail looked at buttressing the cliffs at the bottom and pushing the railway out to sea, which might sound silly given what happened at Dawlish, but the behaviour of the sea is slightly different round by Teignmouth than it is at Dawlish due to the way the tide works, I think. but it cost a lot of money. They did go to the point of actually making a model and building a model to show how it might look. So you can see the green on the left, you can see the green bits of buttressing with the railway sort of pushed out, but it wasn't particularly popular and it was very expensive because it took away the beach, so it wasn't popular locally. And it was certainly unaffordable. So Network Rail were advised to go away and have a look at something different. And this is quite technical, but they've basically broken that section of the route. This is where they are now. They've broken that section of the route down into what they call cliff behavioural units, CBUs, so different geological sections of the cliff. And some of them are more risky than others. You can see the bits of red on the right are where it's particularly steep, particularly rocky, and that's where somewhere in there is where the slip happened before. But they're looking at either looking at the drainage and how the water flows within the cliffs, or more of the same soil nails and netting and the like. But it's still a problem, and it's not going to go away. And that was earlier this year. So that's you can see the private property on the left. I think Network Rail will actually buy this as part of an access route. But obviously, you can see the bit on the left, the grass hasn't fallen into the sea. That's just the way the picture's taken. That's the bottom of the fence, with the grass still attached to the fence. When I first looked at that, I thought glory, but it's a bit deceptive. And that's just to show that there are quite a few people involved in the programme. The main people are the local authorities and Network Rail and the train. The train companies, to a lesser degree, we have less engagement with the train companies. I mean, obviously they stand to benefit, but it's not as if we're building something that provides a new service or a different service. It just protects what we've got. And the local authority and the environmental agencies as well. So that's just a summary of how it's going. Got pretty much 4 phases complete. There's a little table in there which shows the cross-country cancellations, because cross-country were the ones always traditionally the ones that have been affected by the seawall with their voyages, and have a regime in place where they stop running if there's bad weather forecast. But you can now see the number of cancellations has dropped significantly since the work has been completed. It's not zero anymore, I can assure you of that, because there's been a number of occasions in this winter where the trains have stopped running. But there are operational decisions that have to be made. It's down to Network Rail and the train operating companies to say if they think the weather's bad enough, then they'll stop the trains running. What the investment does do is hopefully prevent that from being the case, makes it more resilient, and also helps with clear up. So those scenes that you saw right at the start with the ballast being thrown up onto the railway, and also things coming down off the cliffs, hopefully will certainly the ballast issue won't happen so often, I would think, and therefore, even if they do stop running trains, they can start running them a lot quicker than they would otherwise. I'd said run VT, but I'm going to play the VT later, because I've got 2 VTs. It's a bit of jiggery pokery here. Does anyone want to breathe? Shall I plough on? Everyone's still awake.
Any questions?
Any questions? Is good. Good. Yes, I was going to say, does anybody have any questions online or in the room about resilience in particular? Hi.
What material did you put behind the wall, between the wall and the cliff edge? Was it loose stone or?
That's a good question. It was some kind of combination of concrete and some of the material that have been removed from elsewhere, I think. So it wasn't between the cliffs and that and the back of that and the back of that rockfall shelter. It wasn't entirely concrete, but it wasn't entirely sand either. It was kind of a mixture.
So some recycling.
There was a bit of recycling. Yeah, I'm not sure where I can't remember where it came from, but there was a bit of recycling. He's got
Nothing else? No,
is he having their dinners?
10 people.
They're a bit shy, aren't they?
Yeah. Anyone haven't got
Don't want
anything?
to put their cameras on.
No, they asked not to.
Oh, do they? Okay. No worries. I shall plough on if that's all right.
Yeah.
We'll have some more at the end and I'll try and get the videos going. So the Dartmoor line, again, there's a before and after shot as well. So I don't know when that one on the left was taken, but the one obviously a lot more recent. Again, I suspect most of you know where we're talking about. We're talking about the line that the old Southern Railway line that ran from Exeter to Okehampton and then on, famously called the Withered Arm. The map there is quite helpful because that shows the extent of what's been restored and what was already there. So if you know the geography, you'll know there's the Barnstaple line, which splits effectively at Crediton, but it runs parallel to the line that goes up to Okehampton as two single lines to Yeoford Junction, or Colford Junction, certainly to Yeoford. And if you go to Yeoford now, there's a station on the Barnstaple line, but there's nothing on the Okehampton line. But basically the junction's at Crediton. And then the line went off to Okehampton. There were two close stations at Bow and North Taunton. Another one at Sandford Courtney, which was sort of opened but wasn't. And then on to Okehampton, and there's Okehampton. Well, forget the east. There's Okehampton Parkway. It's not actually going to be called that. It's going to be called Okehampton Interchange. So that's the geography, and the green bit is the bit we're primarily concerned with, because that's the bit that was restored and re-brought into the national network, if that's such a word. So a bit of history. 1871, first train arrived. I don't think that is the first train. I think that's probably around Edwardian times, I suspect. Arrives at Okehampton. Then bottom right's probably 1950s, I would say, maybe 60s. And then on the left, that's Okehampton Yard with the southern locos in the yard. And then the one on the right was sort of symptomatic of what the service had become by the time it was shut. The interesting thing was it was badged as a beaching restoration, but beaching never shut Okehampton Station. Beaching shut the line between Okehampton and Tavistock, which was closed in about 1968 in the end. But he didn't shut Okehampton. He didn't recommend Okehampton for closure. It was British Rail that shut Okehampton as part of further cuts in the 70s. So, when they said it was a beat, all the time that when we were going through this and all the publicity, obviously, that was generated for the restoration, every time someone said, "Oh, it was shut, it was a beaching closure," we had to say, cross that out. It wasn't a beaching closure. It was kind of affiliated to that, but it wasn't him that shut this one.
And that was as a passenger railway, because it was still a freight railway.
Yes, well, yes. So you'll see. Nice segue. Top right, Meldon Quarry, supplier of ballast to the railway, which was still is just beyond Okehampton, as I'm sure you all know because you've used its product. You probably weren't using its products, all of you. So 1972. After the passenger services stopped, the line was retained by British Railway for Meldon Quarry. Then we had railway privatisation from 1994 onwards, and the railway line from Colford Junction up to Okehampton and Meldon Quarry was bought by the quarry owner which was Camas, and is now known as Aggregate Industries. So taken out of the National Railway, basically. Private siding, rather long one, but a private siding. But in 1997, Devon County Council bought Okehampton Station from Aggregate Industries, as was, and the Dartmoor Railway was founded with a view to trying to get some sort of service to Okehampton. And Devon County Council commissioned a Sunday Rover service every summer, which ran up until 2019. You have to have a day rover ticket to use it. You couldn't get a specific ticket to Okehampton, certainly latterly, because Okehampton wasn't on the railway systems. You had to have the Devon Rover to be able to travel on the service. As I say, some Sundays only. 2011, Meldon Quarry got mothballed by Aggregate Industries. So, and has been to this day. Sorry, you're busy taking those. So in 2019, a document that the department produced called Investing in the Southwest, at the bottom right corner there, confirmed the intention to restore services to Oakhampton. The then Secretary of State, Chris Grayling, had already written to Great Western Railway, asking them to restore services. But publishing a document which has it written in there that that's what the government are going to do really helps to solidify that. And then, of course, we had Restoring Your Railway, a government programme that was launched by the Boris Johnson government, and a manifesto commitment in January 2020. So that Oakhampton became the poster child for that policy. As you know, as we've now got a new government, and they've recently announced its cancellation. I could talk at length about that. But so basically, Restoring Your Railway as a policy benefited from the fact that this railway was here and ready to receive could receive services reasonably quickly, certainly more quicker than some of the other proposals that were put forward under the Restoring Your Railway heading. But there was another problem before that, is the trains, the Summer Sunday trains, were run by Dartmoor Railway. They were the line operator. Now, Aggregate Industries weren't a train operator or an infrastructure operator. They were the owner, but they weren't an infrastructure operator in the same way as Network Rail were. So Dartmoor Railway were the line leaseholder and were classed as the railway infrastructure operator. And they were owned by an American short line railway company, which I don't know too much about. And you can read into it on the net, I'm sure, at length. But basically, that company went into administration and ceased trading. So the Summer Sunday services would have stopped, whatever. But that provided an opportunity for Network Rail to go in and negotiate with Aggregate Industries to buy the line back and do the works, because there was nothing running on the line. So they had an opportunity to go in there and sort everything out. So that was quite serendipitous. And Aggregate Industries were willing to listen, and a deal was struck with them and Network Rail to purchase the line. And at the same time, Devon County Council offered Oakhampton Station for a peppercorn to act as their contribution towards the scheme. So, Network Rail now owns as much of Oakhampton Station as it needs to own. It doesn't own all of it, but it owns as much as it needs to run the station. So if you go to Oakhampton, you'll see there's another station on the other side of the tracks. Network Rail don't own that because they didn't need to. So that's still under Devon County Council ownership. It made things a hell of a lot simpler because it just became part of the National Railway and operated the same part as the National Railway. The previous idea was that GWR would have to be a deal struck with Dartmoor Railway to lease the line and to be the infrastructure operator, but it made things a whole lot simpler. And to cut a long story short, in November 2021, the line reopened and the services increased about 6 months after that. This is just a brief project overview. So there were 3 stages to the project, as I say. November 2021, a train every 2 hours. The Network Rail had to go in and do some more work during some possessions to upgrade the track a bit more, to sort out line speeds, to enable an hourly train, which was completed in May 2022. And there's also a dormant 3rd stage in case Aggregate Industry turn around and say they want to operate freight trains again. We occasionally hear that they're interested in reactivating Meldon Quarry, not necessarily for quarrying, but possibly for something else, as another railhead or whatever. And there is an obligation in there, should Aggregate, as part of the deal, should Aggregate Industry within a certain period of time come back and say to us, we're going to run freight trains, so you need to do something about it, which notionally is putting sorting out some of the signalling. Because the line is still operated on a token signalling basis. But if you send a freight train up there as well as the passenger trains, you're going to need something else to lock in the freight train. So the Network Rail scope was as described, and that's what this will focus on, a lot of the pictures. But obviously GWR were just as important because they had to provide the trains. to provide the crew, they had to train them up, and they had to put all the systems on things like real-time trains, which we all know and love, and the inquiry system. But again, where GWR had been given an instruction by the Secretary of State as part of the deal, their franchise deals at that time, it had been written in that they would provide this service, that they would prepare to provide this service. So again, you know, a lot of this was serendipitous in terms of Dartmoor, because you know, that meant that, you know, we didn't have to worry about where the trains were coming from, where the crewing was. You know, GWR had already been told for that and had done so. So they were just the biggest part of this as Network Rail were. Right, so there's the sexy stuff for all you permanent way people. 11 miles of new track laid. This was a fairly novel piece of kit. And basically all the supplies, all the state-of-the-art supplies and infrastructure supplies that the railway could provide were channeled into Dartmoor at that time. I mean, there were things like Crossrail being built, but this bit of kit was quite. And if we get the video shot in a minute, you'll see the bit of how this laid the track in double quick time. And there were 24,000 concrete sleepers stored at Oakhampton Station in the car park. I think we probably had the country's supply of sleepers channeled to Dartmoor, because Dartmoor was such a political priority for the government, to the point where, you know, even Boris and his advisors were giving us, you know, monthly grillings on how it was doing and when we were going to commit to being able to open the railway. Lots of infrastructure challenges, drainage. You can see left, right, and centre there. More people on ropes. Remnants of the Southern Railway. Plates with 1959 written on them. Bit mile posts. I'm not sure how many miles, but it's a half mile clearly. And obviously plate layers. Something like yeah. Products of Exmouth Junction. So that's when we walked down the line. There's the old track. That's again, that's approaching, and in the car park at Oakhampton after they got rid of all the new sleepers and installed those. So that's approaching Oakhampton, as you can see on the right. That's a sort of general picture of some of the other works that Network Rail had to do. There was no railway communications on the line. GSMR. They're basically the Sunday services were run with mobile phones, and the token, which is well and good, but if there was an issue, you wouldn't actually know where the train was. So GSMR masks were installed, and obviously Oakhampton Station, while they tried to retain as much as they could of the heritage of Oakhampton Station, they obviously had to bring it up to current standards. So coping stones and what the tactiles, thank you. There were about 4 or 5 masts, I think, and there were miniature crossing lights installed as well. Again, getting Western Power to get the power to those was a challenge, which meant that we had to put generators in to power them for a period. And getting generators in meant we had to cut down more of the vegetation and sort out more of the fencing. And we had ecology issues on here as well, and these were dormice, which were protective species. So we had to go. Network Rail had to go through a whole process of negotiation with the Environment Agency over and Natural England to provide land and relocate, or provide the opportunity for the dormice to relocate themselves, and the land had to be. The land had to be of sufficient quality and quantity and betterment than what was already provided. So Network Rail had to get themselves involved in acquiring or leasing land to be designated as sort of the dormouse habitat for every sort of section that they cleared. And you know, that added significant cost to the project. But you know, what we might think is great and is a priority over in terms of the travelling public and in terms of the railway, of course, the Department for the Environment might have different priorities. So it was all good fun. Well, it's still good fun, to be honest. There's still work in terms of clearance work, in terms of sight lines and things like that, and certainly fencing, because there's also been a number of animal incursions.
Right.
And so, and you're talking about farmers who, didn't need to worry about the fencing because there was no trains. Whereas now there's an hourly service up and back. So, the fencing has had to be improved. Doing fencing means digging up the land. Digging up the land means you're in dormouse habitat and you're messing about with the dormouse. So, yeah, all good fun. What, unfortunately, what could have been handy is we could have translocated some of the tawny owls from. And then we kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. But yeah, not to be. So train services operated by Great Western, which is always good fun when you see Great Western services arriving at Oakhampton, which is all decked out in Southern Railway colours. 150s at the moment, but might be something different soon. There's movements in the train market to get GWR some new trains. Well, say new, additional. First and last surfeit new for Great Western. And see all the stats I've mentioned some of that already. Hourly services. The big the interesting one probably is the point at the bottom where there's a number of bus services connecting with the station at Oakhampton, including Tavistock. I mean, Tavistock's now got 7 days a week public transport services, which is the first time it's had that since the rail was shut. And people obviously say, well, what about Bute? What about this? What about that? But I mean, there are bus connections into those places because, the best will in the world, you're not going to reconnect the railway to Bute. But it's very popular with students as well. Because the students now use it to get to secondary education and tertiary education in Exeter. It's not done so well for the Oakhampton College, but unfortunately, there's always two sides to every story. Unfortunately, this just shows some of the branding that went into the reopening. Local artists did some work. GWR have a lot of these roundels for their branch lines down in the southwest. A local student designed the roundel, and a local artist did some of the Dartmoor Line stuff. So if you go to the Dartmoor Line website, that's going to look, and that's what Oakhampton Station looks like now with a lot of the heritage. There's a museum there, and there's a shop and there's a very successful, very nice cafe on the station called Bullied Cafe, I think it's called. Certainly Bullied something. Yeah. You can see that's my father there on the right hand side. I took him down for a ride one day. And there's also a museum on the other side as well. That's not part of us, but you'll see that there's a museum. I'll come back to that because that's the VT. That's the opening day on the left. The hand you can see out the train is Grant Shapps, who was Secretary of State at that time. And we had the local school, and we had a band, and we had some 50 singers. And then the bottom right is the I think that's the year after a year on. Yes, it says 258,000 journeys in 1 year. It's been incredibly successful, and it's sort of exceeded expectations in terms of the number of people. And as I mentioned, there's been what's called levelling up funding awarded to build Oakhampton Parkway, which is just to the east of the town, nearer the A30. So all those people that are coming from all the other Devon, North Cornwall towns, rather than coming into Oakhampton, because if you've been to Oakhampton Station, it's right at the top of the hill, and you think you've got to the top of the hill of the station, then you turn left and there's another bloody hill. Yes. And so that that'll be. There's only about 250 parking spaces at Oakhampton itself, so it's home that what's called Oakhampton interchange with buses and the A30 and walking and cycling will encourage some of the traffic to go that way. Right. Yeah, let's head off one question. Plymouth to Tavistock was actually, this is the other end of the route, as I'm sure you all know, and the railway goes up to Birrelston at the moment, and then goes off into Gunsley for historical reasons relate to buses, I think. And the questions asked, well, can it, Plymouth to Tavistock is a project that was in the Restoring Your Railway programme. But we wait and see. We have a capital and spending review ongoing at the moment, and the government has looked in the kitty and found that there's not a lot there. Rightly or wrongly, how much of that is true or not, who's to say? And that's not official government policy. That's just speculation. But we know that obviously there's going to be a complete review of all the projects the department has, not just rail, but aviation and roads, of course. So at the moment, the work has progressed to producing an outline business case for Plymouth Tavistock. I think that's as far as it's gone. Whether it gets any further than that, I don't know. Devon County Council, all the same parties involved again. Obviously, it's a disadvantage in that the railway isn't there anymore, and there are one or two engineering challenges. But there's a viaduct and there's a tunnel.
Yeah.
Unlike Oakhampton, which didn't really have, it had some bridges, but it didn't really have any sort of level crossings or heavy features. But Tavistock's a big town. It's a bigger town than Oakhampton. Whether the hinterland's big, and Plymouth obviously is a far bigger city than Exeter and has lots of opportunities, employment opportunities in the docks as well. So, I mean, it comes down to affordability. And I don't think we'll be restoring that anytime soon. But you never know. Melbourne Viaduct, another iconic structure.
It's in the south, so it's not going to be done in this current.
Well, yeah. I don't know. You say that, but if you follow the general election, Cornwall was completely conservative before the election, and there's not one Conservative MP in Cornwall anymore. There's Labour and Democrat throughout, and parts of Devon as well. I mean, there's still 2 or 3 Conservative MPs in Devon, but there's Labour representation pretty much everywhere. I mean, clearly they're going to focus on their heartlands, I'm sure, but you never know. But I don't think you do in the case of Melbourne Viaduct.
Very nice.
That's it. So I've got a couple of VTs. So if people have got questions on that, I shall try and see if I can work out how to run the VTs.
What's the cost of reopening?
Sorry. So it's at the moment it's cost about 55 million. Give or take. Initially, I mean, it was quite. Network Rail, to their credit, adopted quite a novel approach to the costing, because obviously it was an asset that they didn't own. They had no historical data on it, and they didn't know what they were going to find. So what they did, they needed to look at all the bridges, look at all the drainage, work out what needed replacing or whatever. And actually, a lot of it was falling apart anyway through the previous owners not doing anything with it. And there's a fair chance that the summer Sunday services would have had to have stopped for work to be done. But Network Rail adopted a policy of sort of every project has sort of a level of contingency in the budget. So they had a pot of contingency, but they also had a second contingency pot, which was related to specific items that they thought they would have to do, worst case, in relation to bridges and drainage and things like that, until they went out and had a look. So they kind of started at a figure and then worked their way down. Right. So actually, they started having a figure of around sort of, upwards of 50 million, then worked it down and said, well, if none of this happens, it could potentially cost nearer to 40 million. And that was generally true. It sort of hovered around 45. Oh. But then the Environment Agency and the dormice and the other issues came in, and then it started creeping back up again. So, give or take, it's between 55 and 55 million. Sorry about that. Yeah, you?
I've had the pleasure of going on that this year in August.
Yeah.
Fantastic job. I was very impressed. Well used. Train was standing, leaving Oakhampton, going to Exeter for the day. I happened to go there for a week's holiday. Stayed near the station. Very convenient for the National Park. Fantastic job. But the the bit between Crediton and Culford Junction.
Yeah.
That's rough as hell.
There's a
track.
speed, yeah, well, that's,
And I
yeah,
just made the observation, it was a bit embarrassing.
yeah.
And I just wondered. why.
Well, there was a speed
I
restriction
know
on
that-
there.
Yeah, there must be some pennies there, but
I don't think,
poor track.
it's, well, there's track, it's a combination of track and the budget, because
Yeah.
that's not new Network Rail asset. That was
Oh,
up until the junction where they split.
Mm.
Then there used to be a sign saying, you know, you are now exiting Network Rail territories, kind of thing. That was already Network Rail infrastructure, so they went in and had a look. Yes, they had a speed restriction in there, which was really slow to start with, and that was part of the reason why they couldn't get an hourly service.
So they actually picked it up.
So they did pick it up a bit, I think, but they haven't done everything between Crediton and Culford Junction. I don't think. I think you're right. I think it's still
There's a station there.
Yosa.
It just seems a shame it doesn't stop there as well, won't there?
Well,
I know it's-
yeah. I mean, again, that was cost, but you've already got a service at Yoford.
Yeah.
You've already got an hourly service at Yoford. Crediton's really done well because Crediton was an hourly service, it's now half an hourly service. And I think the signalman at Yoford, at Crediton, I think the signalman at Crediton, don't quote me on this, might have got an upgrade. The job might have got an well, yeah, because, and they explained it when we went there, because when the Oakhampton trains pass at Crediton, and while they're passing at Crediton, the Barnstaple trains are passing at Eggersford, I think. So, and again, I think that's token. But he's got all this to worry about here, but he's also got things to worry about further up the line as well. So it's you know, it's gone from being a fairly sleepy job to actually at times being a bit crazy. Yeah,
No, thanks.
that's all right. Yes.
I think they've used the excuse of having to replace Melbourne Viaduct. Whereas we look back to Ribblehead, when that was used, same excuses, and they turned it down and found it a lot cheaper to
Yeah,
refurbish.
I don't know. Ribblehead, off the top of my head, and I don't know the picture. Ribblehead's got more. Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose Melbourne would be, if they restored it, it would be a diversionary head route, which is what Ribblehead can be used as well. I think there were differences of opinion with. I think there are differences of opinion with Melbourne Viaduct. And some people will say, "Well, you can't run a train over that," and there's others kind of look at it and think, you know, maybe you could. But I understand that even when the line was shut in the 60s, I think the speed limit over there was 20 miles an hour or something like that going over the viaduct. Yes.
Mine's on Melbourne Viaduct. Back in the, I think it must have been the early 80s, when I was in the work section at Paddington, we did a scheme for complete upgrade of Melbourne Quarry.
Oh, the quarry.
Yeah, new screens, new crushers, new weighbridge, and we created an eastern approach to the quarry, which meant raising the old, I think, up line to bring it up to the quarry level. So that meant that instead of having to go over Melbourne Quarry with the ballast trains and reversing into the quarry, they come straight into the quarry from the east. So even then, they were saying that the viaduct wasn't capable of safely taking ballast trains. And so a lot of money was spent in providing an alternative entrance to the quarry from the east, rather than going onto the viaduct and back again.
Okay.
And having done all that for, well, it was still British Rail then, it was then promptly sold to Eastern China Players.
Right.
They owned it first.
Oh, did they?
This lot.
Camas. Right.
Yeah.
The
And we also did a large scheme for improving the approach road coming up from, you know, the main Bay30
yeah.
over the old Packhorse Bridge and so on, which had been widened later. So it's falling apart. The approach road all up the side of the valley there to actually get road vehicles in.
Well,
ECC.
we when we visited, we used the road that stopped underneath the viaducts, which is why you can see they've got the pictures there, and went up some footpath to the road there. But I know there's obviously a lot of rail infrastructure there, because Dartmoor Railway, when they went into administration, they were storing all their trains, redundant trains there before. I think it's all got cleared out there. But
There's still a lot there.
I'm going to need that. Yeah, I think. Let's see if these work. The screen might go a bit funny in a minute. Go with this one. See if that goes. Get this to work. Bear with. I'm going into there, and I'm going into. What's that? Wasn't it? Here we go. See if I think. Oh look. Right. I think Brian was the chap who put me onto you, wasn't he?
Yes. Yep.
He's not there. He's seen it before. Right, so this has got music on it, but there's no commentary on this. It's just the words you can see on the screen. It does have music to it. We did get it working, didn't we?
Yep.
Did.
We've got to play it yet.
Well, I'll try. Let's see what happens. Okay. It's not playing music, is it?
You turn the music up.
Yeah. Go back to the slides. Just. Yeah, hold on, yeah. I gather you didn't see that at home.
Sorry about that. The film wasn't sharing, although you saw it
I'll
on
put it in the chat.
screen.
I can put it in the chat. Bear with me. So this is publicly available. It's on the dartmoorline.com. So if you want to watch it in your own time and see it again, you can do that if I just put that in the chat. I'll send that to you all. So there you go. It's got a picture of government on it, but never mind. Sacked in the morning. Let's see if we can get this to share. So that's on there. Okay. And that's shared there, and it's shared on there.
Yeah, no,
It's on there.
it's working now. That's gonna work.
That's helpful. Well, this is the one that I don't think is. I can't. It's right. I need to turn off. Right, I'll shut up after this because otherwise we'll get echo. So this has got some talking in it. So. And the talking has not come. It needs to. Why hasn't the talking come on?
It's 10 years since a devastating storm struck the town of Dawlish on the Devon coast on the 4th of February 2014. The railway was battered by waves, leaving the tracks hanging in midair and severing the southwest from the rest of the country for 8 weeks. Our team battled around the clock to carry out major repairs, and with the breach fixed, we began to plan how we could better protect this vital stretch of railway from climate change and extreme weather. The South West Rail Resilience Programme was born, and over the past decade, the Department for Transport has invested more than £165 million to better protect the railway between Dawlish and Teignmouth. Our first task was to build a taller, stronger 800-metre seawall and new high-level promenade at Dawlish. The first phase opened in 2020, with the curved edge of the design deflecting waves back out to sea. The second phase, which wraps around Dawlish Station, saw the arrival of an innovative 8-leg jack-up barge known as a wave walker, which allowed our teams to work around the tides. This phase was officially opened in May 2023. As part of the Dawlish project, the station is now fully accessible for the first time, thanks to our new footbridge with lifts. Along the coast near Holcombe, we've built a striking 109-metre rockfall shelter designed to stop material from the cliffs falling onto the track. The 185 precast concrete sections were mostly lifted in at night using a special gantry crane. In the summer of 2023, we began installing 19,700 square metres of netting, secured by more than 6,000 soil nails to help stabilise the cliffs between Dawlish and Holcombe, and our work here continues. We're now looking to the future, with investigations underway into how we can make the railway between Parsons Tunnel and Teignmouth more resilient without moving the track away from the cliffs. All this work will reduce delays and disruption for passengers and help to protect this iconic stretch of railway for generations to come.
It's a disease. I think that's probably it. I'll just check. Oh, have I just left?
What have you got nothing to show further, have you?
To rejoin. Let's try again, shall we? Share. I think, having said that, it's probably it. I'll just check. Yeah, it's not letting me do anything else. Oh, there we go. Back to the beginning. Okay. Is any other questions?
Can I go back to the business of the glue, what's called glued ballast?
Ah, right, yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but there's two things about that. If it is glued ballast,
Yeah.
which then produces a homogeneous mass, and it's rather defeating the object, it's probably more likely to be ballast strengthening using epoxy resin, which
Okay.
then leaves you with a very much strengthened ballast, but allows water to pass through the ballast and then prevents more. The chances are, if you use the glued ballast, you will get a quick runoff off the top surface, but you'll have a problem with it that it can still shift large amounts of it underneath because it will run onto the formation.
Okay.
If you use the ballast strengthening method, it still works like ordinary ballast flow. So water's got a much greater area in which to dissipate. So if you get an overfall from the sea coming straight over onto the track, you want to get it away as quickly as you possibly can. The more area there is of ballast for it to pass through, the quicker it'll get off the track. So I would think that it was probably is the ballast strengthening rather than people use this term glued ballast when it actually isn't. It's the different form.
All I know is that it didn't move when I touched it. It was yeah. What the question I had about that is this is for my going here. So it is. What does that do for like suspension? If it's all glued, one for a better word, glued together.
Yeah.
I mean the ballast is thought to protect the suspension, the rail.
Well, there's no flexibility.
Yeah.
There still is. If you use the strengthened ballast, it still acts in the same way as ballast.
Shock absorbent.
Yeah, except that it is stronger and it deflects much less, but lasts much longer between doing any work to it. The other thing is with glued ballast, you're stuck with it. If you want to do any track repairs, you've got to actually dig it out. If you use strengthened ballast, then normal tango tampers or similar things to that will actually break it up.
Oh, okay.
Problem, and then you can re-glue it straight away afterwards.
It may only have had the shoulders glued.
Sorry?
It may only have been the shoulder that was glued. In which case you'd have normal ballast underneath the sleeves.
That's right, yeah. It was developed by Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh with a company in New Mills in Derbyshire.
Just trying to get that picture up, but I
And
can't.
was used quite extensively on the West Coast main line in places like the old junction of Bletchley, things like that. Places like that.
Okay, but that would be a different purpose, presumably.
Well, up to a point, yes, but there's always the business of getting water out of the track as quickly as you possibly can. Always. And anything that you do that stops that happening is likely to cause problems in other directions.
Just going to try and get the picture of it up, but I can't for some reason. It's not working.
It was glued to stop the ballast being washed away rather than add stiffness to the track.
Yeah, but presumably there's degrees of stiffness to the track that you want. I don't know. You're the expert. Yeah. But you clearly don't want it too stiff. Otherwise, you just.
Well, it comes back to whether you've glued underneath the sleepers.
Yeah.
Or whether you've just done the ballast shoulder.
Yeah.
And I think we just did the ballast shoulder to stop it being washed away.
Yeah.
So that would add some natural resistance, but wouldn't add any vertical stiffness.
John, did you have anything to do with that blue ballast with the people from New Mills? No, at any time with sorry.
Okay.
That's a good question about the footbridge.
At Dawlish,
Yes.
you've reminded me actually, because the footbridge at Oakhampton, the roof blew off it the other day. I forgot to mention that. They're in a storm, because it's all the old Southern Railway footbridge. And I don't know, it was early in the year, the roof blew off that. But of course, it's not Network Rail's asset. So they went.
I'm surprised it didn't have side screen and canopy over the stairs. And
At Dawlish,
yes.
yeah.
Because that little canopy over the lift doors, when the spray comes in sideways, it's going to keep the water off the door.
Yeah, I can't remember the one issue we did have was the Great Western Railway cleaning the glass. That was more of an issue. I don't think there was ever a talk of having a roof on it. I think there was certainly. I mean, a colleague of mine is involved in all these access for all projects that you see.
Wind loading perhaps?
Yeah. Oh, well, there was certainly talk about the view as well as you're coming down the stairs and things like which isn't particularly, that's by the by, but
I know the wind there time to time would have a certain effect on the load, on the structure itself. But
Yeah.
Glass might not be good with the objects in the sea getting washed out.
No, well, it's a lot of spray and stuff. Did you have a question? Yes. Oh, hold on, Miss Lee, I'll go.
Yes, Michael.
To get rid of the ballast problem altogether, has slab track been a consideration to be installed?
Not by us, not as part of this project. That would be a renewal. I think so. We Network Rail do
Like for like.
Network Rail do renewals under their own steam. So you know, when the track is due for renewal, and we didn't renew any of the track at all. The track is still the same track. Renewals are Network Rail has jurisdiction over its own renewals. Because I mean, the only time the department gets involved is if for enhancements, and then you it's cases and things like that because it's objective. Whereas Network Rail knows its own asset, it does its own renewals, it knows when things are up for refresh, and it's only replacing it on a like-for-like basis. So it does its own thing. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, if they did something like that, would that be classed as an enhancement? Probably not. It's just different sort of thing.
It would definitely last.
I think it would be very much an enhancement because the cost of slab track is phenomenal compared to ordinary ballasted track, and you also do end up with long closures to install it.
Yeah. It's redundant now because we've got the wall.
Was it Rodney, were you going to say?
I have a very faint recollection of going to Meldon Quarry on our training, which was 60 years ago.
Ouch.
And I remember a very spidery bridge. That's what I would describe it. It's the first time I've seen an exact photograph close up of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what as you showed tonight.
Yeah, I'll just go
It's,
back on the screen.
a few years ago, we had a friend from here moved to Tavistock. And
Right.
The first time we went to see her, we bought the train to be at Alston.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is what, 5 miles from Tavistock?
yeah, about
The
that.
formation is there.
The formation's there. Yeah.
Yeah, and second time we went on a bus from Plymouth to Tavistock, a very intensive bus service. Seems to me that it's a no-brainer to open the line from Beer Austin through Tavistock
Well,
to Oakhampton.
I think these things they let's get myself on. I don't know how I've done that.
It's not happening.
No, it's not happening there. It's just on there. Right. Okay.
Is that Tavistock?
No, it's Melbourne.
That's
Oh,
that's the bridge in Melbourne.
That's Melbourne viaduct. It's a very clever viaduct. You've got two viaducts there.
Not too many things like
And they're interlaced together. It's one was built in advance of the other. And it's all done up by the Heritage Railway Trust people, but not for trains, just for the cycle path. You can walk underneath on the public footpath. It's quite impressive.
Well, it's unfortunate that Tavistock, the station house has been sold, and I think there's
Yeah.
a sort of office block on the
There's
formation.
a Devon County Council office block, and you've got in Quants Park,
That's
a couple of houses directly on the track there. Apart from that, it's
the
just
station buildings turned over to bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
The ability to have a circular service Plymouth via Exeter.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, as a diversionary route, would be good. But then, if you spend all that money protecting the Dawlish route, you could argue you don't need to spend all that money providing a diversionary route. But and the other thing that people that actually, in bad weather, in history, quite often when there was bad weather and might have affected the coast, cold weather and bad weather affected the Oakhampton route just as much, and it was snowed in. So it's to reopen the Tavistock bit to Beer Alston. I mean, it worked. There's the business cases. There's a strategic case. You could say strategically, it must have a very good case. And again, this is me talking, not the department, because you've got all those people. You've got traffic on the A386, 385 into Plymouth, and the buses have to contend with that. And you've got Devonport, even before you get to Plymouth, you've got Devonport, which has got employment opportunities. So you can't, and Tavistock's not, it's a lovely town for people to go the other way as well, like they do for Oakington. You kind of think, well, the strategic case is probably there. Then you get into the economic and the finance. And the finance is like, is the money there? Is it affordable? Which is a fairly binary question, because if you want to do it, you make money available. And then the economic case is all about, well, is it value for money? Does it present value, good value relative to anything else when you tie in bus services, what you're doing, and the benefits, and what the benefit is for congestion and things like that. But again, there probably is a good case. There probably is a case there if you want to do it. Therefore, it comes down to political will and, again, affordability and not even Department for Transport, our lovely friends at the Treasury, and how much money we've got and what they're prepared to spend. But of all the, I mean, and I knew about a lot of the schemes that came through on the Restoring Your Railway programme, and there were a lot where there was no railway, and there were a lot where it was effectively nowhere to nowhere. You know, Helston, you know, Brent, and this, I'm just talking about the ones in the southwest, Brent to Kingsbridge. I mean, yes, okay, those communities have got to be served, but in terms of a railway, the ones that we put in, you know, Exeter's obviously a huge pull. Plymouth would be a huge pull. I'm working on the Portishead line at the moment. Bristol, obviously, massive city. Northumberland line is going to be the next one to open, going to the other end of the country, serving Newcastle. So, you know, I think Plymouth Tavistock had, as of the proposals where there isn't a railway but there is an alignment and it's not been severed or anything like that, Plymouth to Tavistock's probably got as good a case as any. But as I say, it comes down to politics and will and affordability.
At one stage, a developer was proposing in return for getting planning permission to build 700 houses.
Yeah, I think
to fund that extension.
Yeah, I think that. Well, again, there is a lot of housing that's been done in Tavistock. When we went out and had a look at Tavistock, and the station, first of all, the station wouldn't be where it used to be, because the district council have got buildings where the station used to be. It would be on the edge of the town to the south west. So, you know, there need to be sort of parking and things like that. But there is a lot of development that's gone in around there. I think the Devon County Council have probably taken contributions towards it. They've got most of the land.
They showed a lot of interest.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you don't know. I mean, sometimes it's just, as I say, it's just down to political environment, and obviously, you know, the Boris and that Conservative government raised a hell of a lot of people's hopes for sort of getting their railway back, but it was never, you know, it was always going to be the amount of money that was going to be required to get everyone's wishes in was going to be, and you know, Beeching possibly went to, again, this is just me speaking, but Beeching possibly did go too far, but actually in some cases there was justification for what he did, whether we like it or not. So.
Okay,
Quickly.
one last question.
Yes. Did anybody consider getting the ballast road camp to work from Melbourne Quarry?
Sadly not. I don't know where the ballast came from, but I'm afraid it didn't come from there.
It kept devastating the walls.
Yeah, I don't think you can use Somerset. Don't think you can.
I've been one of the crushes and screens and everything.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, a bit of slide, a bit out there. Yeah.
I shouldn't really leave it on that slide, should I? Leave it on a different slide.
Just a small point. You mentioned that the version, inland version from just south of Exeter through to New Abbott in the 30s, when the survey and everything was done, powers were obtained by the Great Western, and those powers didn't actually expire. They weren't allowed to expire until after nationalisation. I think it was in about 1949.
What, cutting the corner off or something?
To cut the corner off.
Oh, right.
To go through the shot and leave Alton Hills.
Yeah. And Powderham or whatever.
Yeah, because Old College was what, as a young man, was down there doing the survey in the 30s for the parliamentary plans.
Okay.
And they disappeared off into the wilds of Devon, and Paddington hadn't heard much of them at all. They had this telegram saying, "Smith, return to Paddington. Where are you? Return to Paddington immediately." And they'd been away for about 6 weeks. But the powers didn't lapse until the late 40s.
Okay. There's possible work that needs to be done in the ex-estuary. I mean, that's the next thing that the Environment Agency and others are concerned about. I can't remember the name of the marshes up north of Starcross somewhere. Yeah. So,
Okay, I think, it's up past 7, time's marching on. Ed, thank you very much for that. That was very good. Richard, can I ask you to do the vote of thanks, please?
And it's a pleasure for me to do it. Like you, Ed, I am not a railway engineer, though some people think I might be, but I'm sort of. And I'm also a public servant, or was in my career when I was being paid to do things. I worked in town planning, in strategic planning. So I've been sort of, right, we've selected these to do the vote of thanks tonight because we thought we had something in common. So I completely understand what you're talking about. Your talk has been a really excellent talk for us, because it's been looking at something that's not what we normally look at. We normally look at, glue ballast and rails and all sorts of things, and all the technical requirements to lay track properly and build railways properly. But this sets the context of what we're all about. There has to be political buy-in to do things. There has to be an economic need, and the concept of thinking that it was even considered possibly to close the railway beyond Exeter, I suppose, to generalise even more, because of the Dawlish issues, is unthinkable. You think of the, so many people, such a large section cut off. So obviously, politically, that wasn't on. Many of us are familiar with the technical work that was done down at Dawlish, but to see those graphic photographs of some of the work and to see how if one has got one of those lovely little houses close to the cliff, the worries are not yet over, is quite dramatic. I think the structures, your pictures showed how elegant some of them are. I mean, all the works, look really good and long lasting. I think we want to go down and see if the water really does whip back into the sea when there's a storm. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe we look at it from a cross-country train window. But the avalanche shelter is a most satisfactory looking structure, a great addition to the railway view of the area, which maybe in 50, 100 years time will be photographed still, hopefully, as something that the railway did that was really worthwhile. So that talk, that part of the talk was really interesting. It's all very relevant to us too, because we had a number of talks, and the PWI, Permanent Institution, is very worked up about resilience and making sure, getting talks on different aspects of making sure that the railway as a whole is resilient. And we've had talks showing how even infrastructure, embankments and cliffs and so on have, need work now to Victorian efforts have finally, come to the end of their lives. So really good context for the sort of thing that we're involved with. The Oakhampton line, I remember. Oh, just one last thing on the tunnels down at Dawlish. It's slow, quick, slow if you're on the down train, and it's Kenaway, Coruscant, Fillet, Clark, and Parsons tunnel.
Right, brilliant.
And the reason why it's slow, quick, slow is because, of course, the lengths of the tunnels and the gaps between them. Not so easy to understand from an IET, but when we're riding in a Mark I with windows open, it was much better to appreciate in the summer. The Oakhampton line, an excellent example for us, of course, of seeing how a line can be relayed. We actually had a visit here in Reading a few years ago, and we saw the train that Alpha Beta used to relay that actually operating here.
Oh,
so I think when we all saw that, we knew exactly what was going on. Why, when each of those sleepers drops down and it rolls a bit and then goes back correctly, you think, is one going to fall over? Is one going to no, it's okay. But really good example of how a railway can be reopened. Our hopes are set for the future on others. As you say, one or two railways may reopen, but the economics are often quite difficult. But it gives us hope. So that's what we're all about in the Permanent Way Institution. Nowadays, looking forward to rebuilding railways, looking forward to it reinforcing them, making them more resilient for the future, but also, of course, making them more attractive to travel on, so that people see that going by train is something much better, takes the strain indeed.
Yeah.
So thank you for all your work in the department for pushing the railway view forward. We know that in the Department for Transport, there's a great deal more effort necessarily spent on highway work and more general economic issues of transport. But the railways, their days perhaps returning, or they have already arrived. It's great to have a talk from you. Thank you very much indeed. And usual way. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just say to the people at home, apologies for the first film. We didn't manage to share it. We just didn't click enough buttons on the on the computer. We had the sound. It all seemed to be working. Only halfway through did I realise you couldn't see it. So sorry about that to everybody. Richard, next meeting, please.
Yes, next meeting. Well, the next meeting is going to challenge our brains even more. No, well, maybe not quite so much more. Where is he? Colin Brading and David Brace are going to challenge us to our historical and technical quiz, our annual historical and technical quiz. It will be held at the Railway Staff Association, the Railway Club, Reading Railway Pub as it's now called, just down from the station. But please note it's on Tuesday, not on Wednesday. Tuesday, the 3rd of December. The reason being that ASLEF have got a meeting on the 4th and there's a prospect of an overrun. So don't want to have to battle with ASLEF for the space. Anyway, Tuesday the 3rd of December, prizes will be awarded to those who can remember any of the answers, or even if they can't, they need to be ditched out. So that's the plan for December.
And please try and chase anyone up. Bring friends, somebody along. We need more than 9 people because last year everyone who attended got a prize. Let's try and at least, Colin and David put a hell of a lot of work into the questions, and it's a bit embarrassing that only 9 people turn up. So try and get the word out there, try and encourage other people to come and, at least have 15, at least there's some people go home empty-handed. And anyone who's in contact with the people down in the Wessex section, try and get them back interested again and try and get them to come and take away some of the prizes because they always put in a good team. So if anyone has got any connections down there, please try and encourage them to put a team together, and we should have a good night on the 3rd of December.
So what time it starts?
What time, Richard? 6-ish. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
Start a bit earlier, don't we, for the quiz? I think so. We've got more time to drink beer.
Okay, we'll aim for 5:45 start then.
And there'll be a buffet, perhaps partway through rather than at the beginning.
Yeah. We'll do a couple of rounds, stop for some food, and then we'll carry on again. But we'll aim to start like a normal meeting, 5:45. I think the club only opens at 5 anyway, so yeah. So we need a bit of time to get organised. Okay, good. Well, that completes everything for this evening. Thank you for your attending. Thank you for the people at home for listening in. Hopefully, it wasn't traumatic missing out on the first film.
They've got it in the chat.
Yeah, have a look at the chat. You can watch it in your own stuff. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
It's going to be massive. I'll probably be transferred.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, if you drop me an email, I'll.
Yes. Bobby, thank
Make
you.
sure everyone
Yeah,
drops off, otherwise the recording doesn't stop.
It's just no. See you next. I can look at the notes.
Yes.
All the details and then I'll forward them to them.
I know, I hate you've lost it.
Speak. Yeah. Turn off your microphone.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Well, yes,
That relevant news. Can't hear us.
Right.
But I didn't get the sign.
The camera's over there.
Yeah, just get that. Right, I'll sign in. Yeah, so 17, not 16. That's even better.
Do you want to speak? Do you want to put your microphone, turn your microphone off? Or put it on? Unmute, right.
They're coming together quite well.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to put it in the chat? Okay. Where's the chat?
Is that this chat?
No.
Probably we won't be able to defend again, yeah, because
Apart from this.
the answer was.
Oh, that's no.
Question,
Just turn it off.
basically it was late period sprinkle.
Well, we can probably fix that. I came a glorious bottom last time, but still went away with the prize because there were not very many of us, but it's okay.
Oh, you got the rounding cutter now.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah, cheers.
Right.
Thank
you.
Chris.
It doesn't matter. It's the fun being there.
Ed, since you work in the Department of Transport, do you know about David Coles?
Department for Transport.
Huh?
Department for Transport.
Department for Transport.
Yeah, the name rings a bell. I mean, I'm thinking about it.
Right.
Yes, it's all cleared up. Well, that's
Yeah.
the cleaner.
Okay.
It's really, she really does sort things out, but I, they were talking about 4 7
years, 20 years possibly.
Let's see if he's on it.
When I assumed it was the same David Coles, but
Probably, yeah.
Ah, was that?
It's a lot of.
you into finding out.
I'll come on to it.
Can you do it or
Yeah,
should we forget it?
well, it might.
No.
It might not accept that. I have
Okay.
I have my own ones.
Yes, I have that with people Network Rail that they can't transfer stuff or they can't get stuff out of the machine or into them and everything.
But can we transfer it first thing? Don't do that. Let's find my presentation first.
Still on.
Oh, the chat's just gone through.
Mm.
Let's say that. PDF. We'll just save it soon.
I don't think.
Bear with me. Put it in the wrong place, but that'll help. It's on.
Speaking to someone at home, but it's not in this microphone.
And it's like network and any machines any of it's very beneficial.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, we said that in that.
Yeah. This attitude.
It's not playing ball.
Well,
Don't worry, if something simple can be done.
Yeah, I'll see if I
Thank you.
can. We transfer is the best thing. If
you're
it's something,
serving again around me.
Sorry.
I'm gonna. I'll turn this off for the moment. That's all right.
Is it a PDF file or is it a?
Well, I'm trying to. It's a PowerPoint at the moment, but it's just because of all the pictures. It's rather large, 361 megabytes.
Yes.
So that's a WeTransfer job, or it's
Well, converted to
or converted to a PDF. But I don't think it's matching me.
Seen a reference to one David Coles being involved with
So I can look at.
some
I can
new works projects.
look it
I
up.
think, but I thought if I could get an email address for it, I'd try and make contact. I would have thought he would have retired because he wasn't that much younger than me. Maybe 10 years.
David Coles, Chief Engineer, Infrastructure and Efficiency Engineering.
Sorry. Oh,
That him?
yes.
It's just at dft.gov.uk.
David
.coles@dft.gov.uk.
DFT.
We've got a phone. Got a phone.
A friend, sorry.
A phone.
I don't think his phone number.
Right, it's probably not charged. David.
He's
He's chief engineer, is he?
yeah, he's quite high up. He's a director.
Well, he was a very clever chap last year.
Yeah, or is he? No, he's a deputy
David
director.
Toll. Well, he was PW Reading. Well, it was PW Slough, I suppose, but
He's the chief engineer for the department.
Are we gonna,
right. Well, I'll.
No, don't worry.
are we gonna kill this now?
Yeah, I think
I'll
so.
back it up. I think.